Lot was calling for a contemporary pride around voting for Strom Thurmond, as you pointed out, a segregationist, which is not just separate, but separate and incredibly violent and unequal and discriminatory system. And to say that things would be much better off now if we had followed him. This is a pro-segregationist, pro-racial hierarchy, pro-white supremacy political platform that Trent Lott supported in the contemporary moment. Reed was basically making an observation using a term. Again, Negro is a term that people don't particularly like anymore, and there are a lot of political reasons for that that are very legitimate. But there is a color hierarchy in American society, Rachel, and that color hierarchy operates within race and across race. And so, of course, lighter-skinned people often illegitimately benefit extra. It's not that they're unqualified. It's like masculinity and femininity. Women don't benefit to the same degree as men for the same reason. They can all be qualified, but hierarchical systems produce structural injustice. The same thing is true for cultural specificity around blackness. So nothing he said was untrue. It was a statement of fact that helped Obama's brilliance become more viable as a candidate. And that's really what's at stake here. I mean, I have one other thing I think is really important to focus on. You know, there's a lot of suffering that structural discrimination has caused. And I think a lot of the anger from many African Americans who've been frustrated by the comments is the pain associated with that history, which is much more important, it seems to me, than is getting credit now. And we should be talking about the reality of this injury, pain, and discrimination, and not just be angry at the fact of someone pointing it out.
And it is interesting, too, to talk about even just the distance between the words being used to describe, to make an observation, and the content of the observation itself. Of course, when Trent Lott made those comments in 2002, he didn't use any racially charged language at all. Harry Reid making a completely opposite point, but using language that sets us off and that we assume means offense when it does, as you say, sort of reflect a much more complicated relationship with language and race. I think reflecting our overall discomfort in talking about it at all.
Right. It's not only discomfort, but a certain level of illiteracy. And that's why the consequences are so vast and weird and uneven, because we don't have a real exposure and confrontation with the reality of structural racism and how it operates at so many levels. At this point, we seem content with proper language, but structural inequality. So the question is, where is the outrage for the extraordinary range of unequal circumstances for African Americans? I mean, the literature is filled with it, not only for the specific support for Reed's point, which is that color matters and that there's a color hierarchy, and that the blacker someone is somehow considered to be, whether it's dialect, whether it's style, whether it's clothing, no matter, dance, whatever it is, that those associations serve to reduce one's viability, no matter the gift. Those facts are all over the literature. So where are we in our conversation about that matter? Now, maybe it would have been more helpful if Reed had said to me, and I think, in my opinion, if his apology had been included with a statement something like, well, the fact of this is what is in crisis, and we should be putting our time and energy in addressing the injury, pain, suffering, and inequity that results from these realities. Now we're having a conversation. Now we're getting somewhere.
It seems to me like we will know that we've started to grow up when we have fights about racism instead of fights about calling one another racists.
Yes, indeed.
And we're some distance away, but hopefully moving that direction.
Certainly hopeful.
Tricia Rose, professor and chair of the Africana Studies Department at Brown University. It is really a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure entirely. Take care.
Okay, I remember the Bush administration's record on fighting terrorism. You remember the Bush administration's record on fighting terrorism. Liz Cheney remembers something totally, completely, weirdly, wrongly different. That's coming up with the nation's Chris Hayes. And later, rival Tea Parties are fighting amongst themselves. The good news is that somebody's figured out how to get rich off of that. Stay with us.